It's not just another drink or even Mr. Beast with his chocolate bar. Like these have become giants in these industries that haven't even comprehended business in this way, right? And like I saw Logan Paul on a podcast and he was talking about like, we keep costs low and the profits high, which the guy goes, right, you guys don't spend money on ads. And he's like, we don't spend anything on ads. They are the ads, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously, it's not attainable for a lot of people. It's obviously like a longer term thing, but I think, the nature of business has shifted and people don't buy like your product or service, they buy you.
Martians landed.
Yes.
Wearing Prada suits.
Yes.
Drinking Henry Seltzer.
Yes.
Chewing juicy fruit.
Yes, and?
Your branding here.
Yes, brand.
Your message here.
Yes, and?
A verse about.
Yes.
Your product here.
Yes.
I'm Hirsch Redman.
Yes, and?
I'm a message therapist.
Yes.
And I have a podcast.
Yes, brand.
That's right, that's it.
Yes.
We'll help you fix the world.
Yes.
Or your bottom line.
All right.
Your bottom line.
Get it. I get it. Welcome to the Yes Brand Podcast.
In the hot seat on Yes Brand today is Louis Schenk. Louis is the founder of Boost Media. That agency over the past few years has helped over 1,400 founders, entrepreneurs, and coaches leverage the power of the media, podcasts, and social media to create more of an impact and position themselves in their industry. And so we're going to get a little insight into how Louis helps those brands and also how he has built and promotes his own. So welcome, Louis, to Yes Brand.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to dive in.
Well, it's great to have you. I know you're in Australia, so it's very early morning for you. And it's afternoon for me over here. And for the listener, it's whatever the hell time they really want it to be, because they can listen to this whenever they want. So tell us when you started Boost and why.
Yeah, so my background was not media, was not PR. I studied a Bachelor of Entrepreneurship at university. Long story short, I was in college in America, trying to pursue professional golf after that while finishing university. And I always kind of had an itch to do something different, right? That's why I was playing golf. I never wanted to, sit down and get a 9-to-5, if you will. And so anyway, that kind of led me to a couple of opportunities where my sort of first taste of business was running a small events company for a couple of guys when I lived in Melbourne, Australia. And so they kind of saw, compared to the other guys that were working for them, that I was very ambitious, very driven. I was, into personal development, and the way that I kind of communicated with them showed that I wasn't just like a normal guy, right? And so these guys basically started a new venture, which was an e-commerce product changing from a service business. And they said, hey, while we're launching this, can you run the whole other business for us? I handle all the sales, the marketing, and everything. And I had no idea how to do it, but that growth mindset was like, all right, let's do it and figure it out. And so I learned a lot from that. And, fast forward a year, the guys tried to sell me that business and blatantly rip me off. So I was like, well, we have no contracts or anything. I'm just going to start my own. So I started, like an events company in 2018. And, it was doing solid, but it wasn't, crazy. And COVID was actually kind of like a blessing for me in a way, right? Because we were getting some momentum with that. But when I could see overseas that there was, talk of this virus spreading and it could spread across the world, I was like, well, if that comes to Australia, like we're screwed with this, right? And so one of my good friends, he grew up together in Canberra in Australia. He actually moved to Canada, got into high ticket sales, was building sales teams for organizations. And there was a media company that was looking for, remote based sales representatives. And my friend goes, dude, you should just do this on the side because I think this industry will really interest you. And then, learn as much as you can. So I started working for this other guy, and long story short, I worked for him for a couple of months, figured out how the whole business worked, because after running a business, I think, it's hard to go back to being an employee or, just making a smaller cut when you can be making the whole pie. So that's kind of how Boost started, and it just evolved from there. Like I just kind of immersed myself in, things media, PR, branding, and the journey's gone so quick now. It's been, 3.5, nearly 4 years.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, because we don't really ever know what area of business we're we're going to find our expertise in or do our 10,000 hours or whatever it may be, you know, we just kind of start to go with it. We go with the feel, we go with the flow. And sometimes, you know, it's about just learning as much as you can, absorbing as much as you can. What were some of the models that you saw that you felt worked? Because there are probably a lot of things out there that are kind of old school. Maybe they don't work, maybe they do. What kind of methods did you and say, yeah, I think I want to follow that pattern?
Do you mean from like a business model perspective?
Yeah, let's start with from a business model perspective and then from specifically the media landscape.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. So I guess from a business model perspective, like having something where you have a remote team, it's online. Like, you know, I never grew up in the world where, well, my entry to business was in a time that everyone was shifting online. So for me, all I really know in a, you know, B2B standpoint is like how to run a remote company, right?
Right.
Which is quite different to how things were done. You know, people say, oh yeah, you know, you never used to be able to just jump on Zoom and, you know, it always had to be face to face and all this stuff was more difficult. So yeah, from a business model perspective, I mean, something like everyone would want, you know, like something that's lean, something that's profitable and, you know, it's very scalable, right? Where your market is quite big, you're not really capped to, you know, small businesses in your local area, you know. So I think always having that like option to expand the business without having to like hire a ton of staff in another country, you know, like get an office there. So yeah, something that is remote and lean is ideal for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in terms of what was working in the industry, you know, what were you finding?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's evolved so much from, well, at least from what I've seen in the last few years, both from a media perspective and also from like how we, serve our clients. Like initially, you know, when you start in PR, like you don't have a ton of relationships and contacts, right? Like I was fortunate enough to actually, I don't want to say steal a few, but steal a few contacts from the guys that I was working for previously. And so you kind of build these relationships over time. Relationships come and go. People stop working at certain places. So it was always about just finding as many opportunities for the people that were working with us as possible. And so that kind of, I guess evolved into the next stage of the media stuff we were doing, which was a lot of podcast stuff, right? So a lot of what we do for people is get them booked onto other people's shows because as I'm sure you're obviously in the podcast game yourself, you understand
Right.
it. Like it's most people don't think to like, you know, go and reach out to be on shows and not everyone gets reached out to by shows. Like we've got clients who have done things that I can't even comprehend and like no one knows about them, right? Because they've just kind of kept it not a secret. They've just never promoted it. They just work in silence. And so really leveraging podcasting as well now, which I would argue is one of the strongest forms of media, right? I don't know many people personally that sit there and listen to the radio or sit there and listen to television, but all my friends listen to podcasts nowadays. So it's like leveraging these modern day sort of business tools to not only, you know, connect with other business owners, reach more people, but also to, really position them in the market. I was having a conversation with a friend last night. He plays professional basketball and he was kind of trying to understand like what I do. And I was like, okay, let's just say that, you know, I'm a professional basketballer too, right? We're both on the same contract, get the same sponsorships and everything, and, you know, whatever. But let's say that I was going on all the biggest basketball podcasts around the world, right? Like, and you just kind of just did that. Like, think about from like a, you know, your fan base perspective, right? Like, how are they going to see me differently to you if I'm that person on all the shows? It just gives you that extra sort of level of status, which, you know, status has always been a thing since, you know, the kings and queens. The resources always kind of flow to that. So I really look at them as, not just a way to kind of share a message or whatever, but also to be seen as like a leader on a topic.
Yeah. Did he hire you to get him on some of these podcasts?
Hopefully he's got a big contract that, like if he takes that, then he's going to be doing amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but I think you're right. And I think podcasts have accomplished something that did not exist. You know, it really is an evolutionary thing. When I started in PR, and it was just because I was in, you know, film/advertising school, and I got a part-time job, and I was working for a publicist, and this was just like very old school. He had a ton of books with, you know, names and addresses and phone numbers of media outlets, and some were TV. He represented authors. I think primarily authors and experts, right? And so he would say, okay, you do, O through, you do O through Z, and let's go. And you'd open it up, and it would have Oprah Winfrey Show, and you would call Oprah Winfrey Show, and you would just like keep calling till you got through, and then you would, but literally, like, that was your option, was to get on, and then you were go down the list to places that were local, places that were not as high visibility, but it was what an old PR style was, except that there weren't, places you could reach out to that, have, let's say, 10,000 downloads, 20,000 downloads. You don't know, things that are ranked and things that are, and the audiences don't have to be huge, right? The audience just has to be a good audience for whoever the guest is,
Correct.
And so I think having that, those options is incredible. And you're right. This ubiquitous kind of nature of, I'm hearing about this person everywhere, that kind of thing. That's what you want. You want your client to be all over the place. Now, you obviously are you're doing the same for yourself, right? You're on a lot of podcasts, you're on this podcast. So sometimes, though, we have a hard time doing for ourselves what we're doing for others, partially because if you call up about a client, you say, oh, it's a third-party validation, oh, I have this great client, blah, blah, blah. So who does that for you?
Yeah, my team who book for our clients will just follow the similar process to me. But, like you just said, like for the last, I'd say for the first half of this year, like I was so busy, like working on like the back end of the business, focusing on, growth and systems there, that like I did neglect it a lot, which it obviously happens, but I think you kind of go through phases. And, I don't want to say I have like unique philosophy on like, like a personal brand, but I think some people think like to have a personal brand, you need to have like millions of followers, right?
Right.
But I really think the way that you can convey a message to people, and not like, I hate the thing that like, people say fake it till you make it, or perception is reality. But like, think about it. Like if someone, reaches out to you on LinkedIn to have a conversation, if they don't look like the type of person worth booking a call with, then you're not probably going to take the meeting, right? So it's like, how can we, like, let's say someone has like a year of experience in business. It's like, how can we make them look like, not like $1 million, but, how can we get them to share their message in certain ways that it will make them look like a leader on the topic as they continue to grow and evolve? Because, it doesn't happen overnight. Like I'm not a huge person, you know what I mean? Like I'm not like a famous person, but it's like about continuously kind of building on that and leveraging. I always say that if you don't have the brand, people don't buy, right? And so focusing on how can you actually leverage what you have now? People just have this infatuation of, oh, I'm just going to, post content and just get millions of new clients and all this stuff. It's like, how can you create connections with people through other channels where they see your content, they see you, and then like, oh, wow, actually, would love to have a conversation with this person, and you kind of take them throughout the sales process. So without going on too much of a tangent, I just think you really need to, wherever you're at, you need to leverage your brand as much as you can in the ways that, make the most sense for your business.
Yeah. And also when you do get people on a podcast, and when you get on a podcast, you can have conversations like this where, they're not just sound bites. It's not just, and we've all heard people on podcasts where they have the same exact conversation and they just figure they're going to do it for 50 audiences, and that's great. But I prefer, and the way that I interview, I think, lends to it, to bring out something else, so that if you put the whole picture together and you listen to them on, one show or another show or another show, you'll hear certain concepts repeated, but you'll hear different sides and see different sides of a person. And that's, I think, why I got into this, to the podcasting part in the first place, was because working with brands, I'm trying to really preserve the personal part of it. I think all branding's personal. I want to draw out from my clients. And so I guess I end up doing the same thing with my guests. I want to draw out what makes them different, what makes them special, so that they can incorporate that into their messaging. What do you think, to that point, Lewis, is the kind of secret of your success in the business with Boost? What is that special thing that you feel, no other company has?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I mean, over the last few years, like I've hired a lot of different people in different roles, right? It wasn't until probably like the last 6 to 12 months where like you really kind of overcome your own beliefs as a person, as a business owner. You're like, okay, shit, it actually is kind of scary to hire, your first full-time employee where you're paying them benefits and all this stuff. And so like, I think having a team that is really driven and committed to our client success, right? And one of the things that I love, and I think every business owner should have within their team, is just like a team wins channel in like whether you communicate in Slack or email, whatever. So like every day, seeing a team win where it's like, landed this show for a client, got this media interview for a client. Like every time I see the team wins channel highlighted, I'm so G'd up and excited. So I think when you can create a culture of like wanting to share wins and wanting to, be proud of the work you've done for your clients, it kind of reflects into the work, right? Obviously, nothing's ever perfect, but like when you're committed to your client success, I think they can feel it, and yeah, I would definitely say that.
Now, are your clients mostly in Australia? Or are they outside of the country? What's your demographic like for your client and for your ideal client?
Yeah, so we have clients in US, Australia, UK. I mean, we work with people in Europe as well, but basically, like it's always hard, people say, oh, you got to pick the exact niche and all this stuff. But one thing that we've really kind of narrowed down in terms of like client persona or whatever ideal client profile is like company founder, less than 50 employees, uses the personal brand for business. Like with those three things, like there's not much we can't do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have people who are like, oh, I have like this e-commerce product or like this, golf shop, whatever. And I'm like, it's just not what we do, right? We work with founders. So yeah, there's not many industries that we haven't done. And, that could just be a mistake on my part, but it's worked pretty well so far. So yeah, I'm not looking to change it anytime soon.
Well, first of all, if it's working, it's not a mistake. And there is a lot to be said for focus and for serving a certain kind of client. I've done it both ways where I've worked in a super niche, industry niche. I did that twice, once with the film production world and once with footwear. And what I found was I'd rather niche in terms of the kind of service I provide than the category of the brand or the client, meaning, at that time, when I was in the footwear side, I was doing a lot of retail clients. That was good because that was a niche. They didn't have to be footwear, but they tended to be. They could be fashion. They could be any kind of brick and mortar. They could be online, but they're retail. It was like it was a category. But I prefer to be like, I like what you're saying about founders. I find that people with a personal brand that connection is also good, where it's small enough that their personal brand matters, I think gives you a lot more room to play. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if they're doing handbags and that's their thing, that's going to be about a whole other, it's not going to have anything to do with them. Honestly, it's going to be about the price point and the materials and the manufacturing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So looking ahead, what are some milestones or stuff that you haven't done yet that you would like to achieve in the near future?
There's a few. Before I touch that, I want to elaborate on what you just said because like the whole personal brand thing, like it's gone to show with all these celebrity brands nowadays, right? Conor McGregor with Proper 12, now Logan Paul and KSI with Prime, right? Like people, like I haven't bought either of them personally, but people will buy those products because of the person, right?
Right.
It's not just another drink or even Mr. Beast with his chocolate bar. Like these have become giants in these industries that haven't even comprehended business in this way, right? And like I saw Logan Paul on a podcast and he was talking about like, we keep costs low and the profits high, which the guy goes, right, you guys don't spend money on ads. And he's like, we don't spend anything on ads. They are the ads, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously, it's not attainable for a lot of people. It's obviously like a longer term thing, but I think, the nature of business has shifted and people don't buy like your product or service, they buy you, right? So if they like you and they like what you're about, then they're going to buy that, right? Obviously, not in every context. In enterprise, it can be different, but from what we've found in, small to medium business, it's, when the founder's involved a lot, they buy you.
I do like that point because it is an enviable position to be in, but does speak to the power of the personal brand. So yeah, they may not have a household name or they may not have millions of followers, but they may have a very clearly defined persona. And the clearer that is, the easier it is to sell. So talk about the future. Tell me what's on the horizon.
Yeah, so short term, we're doing kind of like, I don't say like a big push, but we're going to be focusing a lot of our marketing to the US. It just brings to like a much bigger market in terms of, mainly podcast opportunities for clients, but then also, like new clients that we can serve. And then also building some software. So I want to productize part of the business. And, I think my software bill each month is like up to like 2,800 now. So like, when you find good software that works, you're never going to stop paying for it. And so we already pay for several podcast softwares. And I'm just kind of thinking long term, I'm like, there's no reason why I can't do the exact same thing, make it better. And then, for the people who couldn't afford to work with us, they have a product that they can use, right? Like a couple of my mentors are in software, and there's kind of like I don't want to say it's like a trend, but a new structure towards how they're going about marketing the software, right? And it's like creating some kind of educational thing on the front end where it's like, whether it's $20 or $1,000, right? Where you provide a course on how to, build a podcast, for example, let's say. But then like they have a software that the people can use that helps them facilitate that whole thing. So it's like rather than sell a software, they teach them a skill, which then they can use the software to grow, right? There's a guy called Iman Gadzi who, I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He's, kind of blown up in the business online stuff, like had a big agency, was making a lot of money there. And then, was showing people how to start their own agencies, which there's a lot of people doing that now. But then he started a software called Agency Flow, which is now called Flowsy. And basically, like I think they get the first 3 months free on there joining him, but then it's like a sticky business because they'll just keep using that to run their whole agency on. So I think, longer term software is definitely, a great model. Takes a lot to invest initially, but once it's built, it's like a compounding sort of vehicle.
Yeah, I love what you say because, software is only as good as what you do with it. And it isn't in and of itself your solution. It just makes stuff happen faster, more efficiently, better time spent on more important things. But training the client is a big cause of mine now. Like as a writer, I used to think, I'll train writers. Then I was like, well, I should just train clients to utilize the methods that I use to write for them. And then they can learn to write for themselves. And not everybody can do that. Not like I couldn't do that until I figured out a system. But once I figured out a system, I was like, okay, I would rather teach everybody how to be a really good writer to express themselves with the tools that I give them than have them have to keep trying to find people who are in sync with them who can get it right, And I think that's what it is. Like coaches, writers, experts, everything. It's all a personality thing. It's all who do you feel comfortable with? Who do you trust? And so even if it's software, if people trust you and it's coming from you, then that's your brand, right? It's an extension of your brand. They're going to trust your software. They're going to buy your software because it came from you and they trusted you. So let's leave our audience with speaking to people who are just starting out. You're pretty young yourself, but speaking to young people who are coming up in this world where let's say they're just coming out of a pandemic and they're just getting into business now, because we do have a lot of listeners who are in that position. It's their first time out as entrepreneurs, as business people, as thought leaders even. But they're coming out and they're coming into this world. Do you have any advice for them in terms of starting their own businesses?
Yeah, like the first 1 to 2 years, you're going to have to put in way more effort than you could have imagined, right? Like if you, like we talked about before the chat, like, getting up at 5 a.m. I'm not saying I do that every day right now, but like for years and years, I was, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. just working like nonstop. right? And obviously you build systems, you hire team members, you can kind of focus on less. But initially, yeah, you have to go so hard. And I always just tell people like, it's so cliche, but like just be as transparent and authentic as possible in your marketing, right? Everyone nowadays I see is like gloating about how much money they make and all this stuff. It's like, tell people how much money it costs. Be transparent on the expenses. Everyone shows their revenue, which I know people who will gloat about making $10 million in revenue. And I know for a fact from people in their team that business is losing money every month, right? Even though they're making $10 million a year. So it's like people, yeah, just be careful who you like take information from as well, because people will always kind of sell you the dream. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Alright.
If you liked the show,
Yes, and
it worked for you,
yes, then
subscribe and leave a
yes, friend.
5-star review.
Yes, friend.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Did I make it clear?
Yes, friend.
Get your branding on
Yes.
before they're gone.
Yes.